I'm so grateful I didn't get what I wanted instantly, because there are some things that I, by the grace of God, didn't get. And if I had, it would have changed my life and not in a good way. So I think I've learned in God that if there's a delay, sometimes it's because he is moving things out of the way, or he's changing something that I have perceived as him, and he's protecting me. And so I think in the beginning, I used to always think it was rejection of my timing, rejection of what he wants to give me. I looked at it as a painful exchange. Now, again, decades in, when there's a delay, when there's a no, when there's a maybe, I am less impulsive to push God to do it, and I'm more curious. Hi, welcome back to Havilah's podcast. I'm your host, Havilah Cunnington, and I'm thrilled that you're here. We are having a conversation about purpose and destiny. The series that we're doing is called What Am I Doing with My Life? Because I don't know about you, but I have had that question many different times in my life. What am I doing with my life? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this what it's supposed to look like? Is this what it's supposed to feel like? And if you're not asking that question, then I'm wondering if you're on autopilot, because the rest of us are saying, what am I doing with my life? Is a question that's really important when it comes to building our life in God and what he's called us to. So we're going to have a conversation. I'm not by myself. In fact, I invited my friend and author coach of the Havilah's Author School, Mark, to be with me today. Mark, how you doing?
Hey, Havilah, doing great. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Of course. Listen, you're been in my favorite people in the earth and on our author school. But I know for you, a lot of people may not know your story, your journey. I'm curious. I know you live in Atlanta, Georgia. I know you have a whole lot of children and you have a wife. I want to know a little bit about who you are, and maybe give us some kind of picture of what you do on a daily basis or a weekly basis. I know there's a lot. So let's just start with the simple stuff.
Okay, well, that's kind of a loaded question. So, um, I've been married for 16 years to my awesome wife, Katrina. We are foster and adoptive parents. We have four wonderful little boys aged 8, 6, 4, and 4, and that's a lot.
That is a lot, Mark. That is a lot. For the rest of us, there are people that have two little girls that would just be lost on. But for the rest of us that have four boys, you guys, it's mayhem. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mark.
You completely get it, and I'm
I
glad that
do.
someone out there does. Um, and let's see what else. I am a worship pastor, and I've been doing this since I got out of college. So what, right around 2006? So I've been doing that for a while as well. I lead worship for 4 services every Sunday at our church in Atlanta. That used to be more. But church kind of life has changed after COVID. We used to have 7 services back in the day. So
Wow.
to me, 4 services is a break. But when I say 4 services, people are always like, that's so much. And I'm like, actually, it's not. It feels like a break to me. And then also recently author, because of your author school, of course. And I completed my book last year. It came out on my 40th birthday. So yeah, lots of things going on, and we recently reopened to be foster parents again. So here we
Come
go.
on. I love it. Now, we're talking a little bit about discovering God's purpose for our lives. And the way that we had a lot of Legos in our house with our boys. Actually, the first two really enjoyed Legos. The other two don't as much. And I have thousands of dollars of Legos just sitting in bins that I cannot get rid of, because just the cost and the enormous investment, and just the love that went into those Legos. I have yet to decide what I'm going to do with those. But I was thinking about the purpose of God, and often it feels like we land on the earth and we have this pile of things. It's like Legos. They're all different colors, different sizes. And we don't really have an instruction manual. It's kind of like, okay, here you go. Build a life, build a home, build a marriage, build some kids, build some income. And it can be overwhelming. It can be tedious. It can be discouraging. And so when it comes to purpose and God, the way that I would relate is that until we have a conversation with the Creator and we see the picture that He had designed, we will miss it. We will try to build something, but it's not sustainable. The Bible says, "He who builds his house on the sand, it just goes away. It won't have the firm foundation. But if we build our house on the rock, our house will last." So I'm curious for you, when you began to build your life in God, did you always have a manual that told you what to do? Did you have a relationship with God from the get go, or how did that journey start, where you began to understand that He had created these pieces and was beginning to develop them into the picture He had for you?
Oh, isn't it so good that we never get the full picture? Because if we did, we would completely mess it up. Or maybe I shouldn't speak for everyone. I know I would. By the way, sell your Legos on Facebook Marketplace. You can probably make a pretty penny. I started laughing when you mentioned that because I just stepped on one last night and it hurt
Oh,
so.
yes. Oh, it's the worst. The worst. I thought about creating a vacuum for Legos, and then I realized it was invented. I'd already thought about there's got to be a vacuum for Legos. Anyway, I missed my window.
But yeah, so for me, I think when I realized that, I can narrow that down to one conversation with God that really kind of started me on the path. You know, when you have, like, when the first time you hear God speak to you and you're like, it was right. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's a pivotal moment where it's like something that's just between you and God, and you're like, I really feel like God spoke to me, and then it comes to pass, and you're like, I really heard from God. So for me, that was I was 17 or 18, and I was finishing up high school. And I remember there was this specific verse from Isaiah. I'm not going to quote it correctly, and forgive me. Usually when I'm on stage, I'm like, the Bible says, because I'm horrible. I'm like, it's in there. You look it up, pull out Google. But in Isaiah, there's a scripture that says, "Come, you who have no milk and have no honey," that sort of thing. And I felt so deeply in my heart that God was saying, you're going to go to school for free. And I was so scared to tell anyone. I told my now wife. She was the only person I told. And wouldn't you know that that year, there was a scholarship created for the school that I wanted to go to, and there were only 5 given out, and I got one of them. So I was able to go to school absolutely for free, and it was a private school, so, that ain't cheap. So, like, for me, the building blocks are, I don't know that I've ever seen the master plan. We only ever get glimpses of that now because I'm 40 and apparently that's old. So I can turn around and look and see that things have kind of fallen into place and they make a little more sense now. But at that point, I was just really trying to follow the voice of God. And honestly, I think that's the best we can do, is to really, every step, every moment, we're still just following the voice of God. Even when we have a family, even when we have a marriage, even when we have a business or a church or a this or a that, you're still going every moment, every step, like, okay, God, what's the next building block? What am I not seeing? Because we never have the big picture. So I hope that answers your
It
question. But
does.
that
It's great.
really is one of the things, like, I can really look back at that moment and see God was building my faith and asking me to step out and listen and follow through. And he did it. I didn't do it.
He did it. It's like he said, "This Lego is going to fit right here," and you went. It did. It clicked in. I'm curious, has there been a time when you were looking for a specific Lego in your life and it didn't happen, or it was not the piece that you thought it would be, and you found that it was really God in your life working?
Oh, well, absolutely. I guess, I mean, we all probably have several, but I've been in ministry for a long time, and there was a season where you're a seasoned minister, so you get this. It was just really hard. Things weren't really working. That church wasn't really growing. But what was happening is I was growing. I really felt like I was on the backside of Egypt in the wilderness, doing all sorts of crazy things and working really, really hard. But what I didn't realize is that those things that I learned in that season are the ones that prepared me for the season that I'm in now. And in that time, I would have thought, like, this is horrible. This is not great. God, where are you? What is going on? But that was the school that I needed to be able to be effective in this season. And then more specifically, uh, the season of, and I'll just be really candid, the season of infertility, like
Yeah.
that was really, really hard. That was like 8 or 9 years. And if it hadn't been for that, we wouldn't have found our way into foster care and then eventually like serving kids until some came up for adoption and our family wouldn't be here. So, I mean, yeah.
Did you wrestle with that, Mark? Like, I have so many friends that have had that journey, and it is, I mean, I've had a front row seat to several friends that have contended for decade, for many years, not decades, but almost 10 years. I had a PA once that contended for 12 years. It is a journey where every month, you're thinking I could have the baby or we could get pregnant, and then it doesn't. And there's so many things. But I'm curious, when you were in that pursuit, did you battle with feeling like God was letting you down or that you were somehow missing something?
Oh, I mean, I think it would be just dismissive of my humanity to try and lie and say anything else, you know? Yeah, it was really hard. And again, I'll be very candid. It's specifically hard when you're watching your wife like cry and being upset. This is something that, granted, I wanted it, but if you
Yeah.
knew my life, you'd know that like calling to be a mother is that's that's what God has had for us for so long, and it was something in our heart. And then to also find out that the issue with the baby making equation fell on my side, and as a man, that feels very emasculating. And so
Yes.
to be like, yeah, I mean, it was really hard. I don't know if I ever came around to the place of like, God, you're letting me down,
Okay.
but more so the place of we're so behind. And I definitely experienced depression with that for sure. I'll be just 100% honest with that. But yeah, that sense of being left behind. And I don't think that's just with infertility. I think that's with all sorts of different things, whether it's someone looking around and going like, wait, I'm not married yet. And all my friends are getting married. But for us, it was like, not only are our friends married, now they're on their first, now they're on their second, now they're on their third kid, and they've got this house and they've got this thing and they've got this job. And we're just sitting there going, okay,
Mhm.
but God, you told me to do this. And God, like, so I don't know if I ever fully formed the thought, like, where are you? But I was definitely forming the thought of like, this ain't going well. And why am I not moving forward at the same
Yeah.
pace that everyone else is?
I love that, Mark. You are exactly right. I remember that feeling after I was in the 17th wedding and I was throwing the second, and then it was a friend that got married and then they had one, two, three kids, and I'm still waiting to get married. I remember that I'm behind and the shame of being behind. There's something about, if I could fix it, I would. I can't, there's certain things we can't fix. And so then you have this weird shame of I'm doing something wrong or I'm behind and I don't know what to do different. And then if that's not enough, people remind you, it's do you want to have kids or don't you want to be married or have you dated anybody? Are you dating anybody? And you have this weird feeling of, even for me, it's, or someone might be saying, what college are you going to? Or what career do you have? And you're still doing, the thing that's maybe something you didn't want to do. And you got stuck in it because you had kids and family and you're just going, this is what I'm doing. I think people relate to that. And when I would buy into that, which I did often, it was depressing. I felt as if I was completely like somebody forgot me at the store and everyone's at home having a meal. So I'm curious for you, um, how can you see now after all of that journey and you went, wow, okay, now I have four little boys in my house. We're going to have even more possibly. How did you see that fitting into your life? And now looking back, what can you see? What value did it have in your life?
Well, number one, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. Going through infertility has made me such a more compassionate person. And I know that might not be your story, but you were just talking about marriage and having to wait for marriage, but it has changed my language. I am not so quick to say, hey, are you dating anybody?
Mhm.
Hey, what's next for you? Hey, when are you getting married? Hey, when's that ring coming? Or hey, you had that one kid, when's the next one coming? I've learned how to tailor my language because and I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, so please don't misunderstand, but like you don't realize the pain you can cause sometimes if you're not thinking behind what's going on behind. So I would say first and foremost, that that's something that that season taught me was how yeah, just to tailor my words and to think more in a more compassionate and merciful way. But I don't know if I got to the crux of your question there.
No, you did. And you did. And the thing was what it taught you. And I would second that like 1,000 times, which was I was on this trajectory of it's just, my life's going to be this, 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 this. And then you come to a screeching halt and you're doing everything right and you're hoping that it's going to work and to be waiting, just to be waiting. And that idea of just a simple question could cause such a feeling of shame, embarrassment. I just found that now ministering to many people, I'm the same way. I'm way more attuned to not asking questions that can trigger pain or shame or blame, but I'm more curious about what they want to talk about and how they want to talk about it. And then also I'm less I'm more slow to not check boxes off with people, but to let them lead that part and to also bring hope in the middle of that when they say it, because I often found that when people would ask me, do you have someone in your life? And I would say no, it was as if I didn't have an answer that they wanted to talk about. So then they would move on. And so they either would leave me in the middle of a conversation, or it was almost like I would go to family, and because I didn't have a marriage or a baby or a career, nobody knew what to talk to me about. It was like, okay, that's good. Anything else? And so I felt like there were these less value I was given. Now I know, having 4 kids, it's just the conveyor belt of society. But I think for me, compassion, that when someone's in the waiting, to treat them tenderly and gently and to be kind and to understand that they don't need me to fix it. They just need me to acknowledge and to just give them a seed of hope, which is, I've been there, or I understand it. I see you and I can't believe it. I even at times now, which is like my secret, so now everyone's going to know, but I often will ask people, do you have kids or do you have fur babies? And I say it intentionally because when people would say, do you have kids? It's either yes or no. But if you can expand, are you dating anybody? Are you working on a trip coming up? Opening the conversation so that it's not just a yes or no. Did you get this? Are you doing it right? But actually, I'm curious about your life. And it doesn't end with that question. So again, you're not asking me the question, but I tend to kind of open it up. So I'm curious for you, as you begin to build this life in God and this kind of Lego system, if you will, of like, this is what it's supposed to look like. Do you now at this ripe age of 40, which is, it's so young, Mark. I don't know about you, but being in my 40s, it feels like, gosh, you're a teenager. Do you think what you're seeing being built is even halfway there, or do you think that there's more? Do you think that there's more that you are still contending for, or maybe even as you begin to build and look back in the decade that you've been in, are you seeing that you're starting to see the groundwork of something that's been being built and has like the ability to be built on? So I'm just curious, like, what page of the manual are you on and you're building your Lego structure?
Wow. 40 does feel younger now that I'm here. I'm like, wow. So when someone's like in their 60s, I'm like, that's so young. You're so young, you know? Uh well, it's interesting. And again, I'd love to know your thought on this, but it seems like when you're a kid, when you're 15, 16, 18, 20, you look ahead to the age we are now and you think, oh, at that point, like you've kind of arrived or you at least have it all together. You're a full-fledged adult. And I
Mhm.
look now and I'm here and I'm going, I just got started. I
It's true.
I still feel like a toddler in a lot of ways. And I guess when I look in the totality of, our faith tells us that, in Christ, we're going to live forever. So truly, we're still in toddlerhood. We're still just getting a little glimpse, but I guess of our life here on earth, I still feel like I'm getting started. I still wake up, and of course, again, not perfect, but I still wake up with that sense of like anticipation of like, What's the next thing? Where are we going next? And that would be something I would say that people that think the Christian life is boring. I'm like, I don't know what kind of life you're leading, but mine has been wild and roller coaster and crazy and very full. I also despise the term busy. Full. I like full a lot better.
I like
Um,
that too.
but there's still God's still making room for more. I hope that
Yeah,
makes sense. Like I
it
just
does.
feel like there's something I'm not done. I'm not done. And I don't know if I ever will be. And I don't want to get to a place in life. And maybe you're like this too. I don't like the term like retirement. I feel like people use that term. It's like, to me, what it feels like, the connotation is I've finished my work and I'm just going to sit back and be. And I'm like, but if I am purposed by God and called by God and have things to do, I just want to keep doing that till I die. I'm not saying I won't rest. I'm not saying I want to relax, that I won't relax, but like I'm still going to be anticipating the next thing, the next step. How can I serve? Who can I help? What legacy can I leave up until the very end?
I love that. And I totally agree. I totally agree with you. I think that's really well said. I'm curious, you've been a pastor for many years and you've watched people in your community try to build their life in God and build what God might be calling them to. Where do you think people miss it when it comes to building purpose and destiny in God in their lives? What do you see as a pastor, as a man? What are you seeing in people's lives where you think, gosh, if they just understood this, this would really help them?
Wow. Well, if that isn't a loaded question, Havilah. Um, think one of the biggest things where I see people off ramp, um, is thinking that it's going to be instantaneous. As I mean, again, we're not old, and I'm gonna hang on to that. But now that we're older, I realize that while we love to major sometimes in on the platform, in worship, in sermons, on the suddenlies of God, and there are things that God does suddenly and miraculously and instantaneously. I do see that there seems to be like a process, a continuance, a steadfast, a faithfulness. And I just think when I see people on ramp, they've they've bought in, they've accepted Christ, they're going full tilt, but when something doesn't change fast enough, they begin to fall away. And, in my life, I could probably count on one hand those really big pillar moments where God did something like completely life altering. Most of the other things are these small incremental changes where my life was radically transformed, but it was walked out in faith. It wasn't something that was done like that. Does that make sense?
It
And
does.
so I just think people sometimes, because our society has gotten to a place where we want things to be instantaneous. We want that McDonald's. We want that experience where I place the Starbucks order on the app and then I can go pick it up, or Uber Eats, or like everything's like instant. But that's not that's not how God works. Like there are times when that happens, but most of the time, just like in a marriage, you both become transformed and different through the life of the relationship. D- I mean, are you? Am I crazy here?
Absolutely.
What do you think?
No, I agree. And I think, I mean, for those of us that know, I'm so grateful I didn't get what I wanted instantly because there are some things that I, by the grace of God, didn't get. And if I had, it would have changed my life and not in a good way. So I think I've learned in God that if there's a delay, sometimes it's because He is moving things out of the way or He's changing something that I have perceived as Him and He's protecting me. And so I think in the beginning, I used to always think it was rejection of my timing, rejection of what He wants to give me. I looked at it as a painful exchange. Now, again, now decades in, when there's a delay, when there's a no, when there's a maybe, I am less, impulsive to push God to do it, and I'm more curious. I take a step back and I go, okay, God, if you're not opening that door, and I know I have the right heart, I'm doing it for the right reasons. I believe it's you. I'm risking in faith, but the door isn't opening. I mean, there are times in my life where I have shoved that door and I've told everybody that's the door, and gotten the door slammed in my face. And so now I've learned that if the door is closed or it's not open, to be curious about the door behind me, the door on the left or the right, or to not be ashamed to be in the threshold, just to sit in the door. And I think there's something about that that is, it takes humility and it takes a faith in God to say, I'm not going to run through that door over here because that's open, but I'm going to sit in front of a closed door until he says, don't go through or go to the next one. And I just have found, I think with believers and the ones that I'm around, I see people that when they face a closed door, they look for the next open door. And it's as if it's seconds away. If I'm not marrying him, I'm going to date this one. If I'm not doing this, I'm going to move here. And I just think it's causing so much pain because the delay is his protection. Sometimes he just wants you to sit in front of the door, and the closed door is not about him fully saying no. Sometimes it's about timing. It's the door will open. You just need to wait for a minute. And he wants to know if you're under his lordship and his leadership, and you're not just looking for an open door. And I think that's been really critical. So I'm asking more questions in my own life. If there's a delay or something's closed, I go back around and I am way more curious. And I am also, I'm less likely to demonize the door being closed. I'm less likely to villainize somebody because they didn't open the door. And I'm more curious about, Lord, every time you've closed a door, you have led me into a better door. It didn't feel like a good door. In fact, it felt like a side door. It felt like a back door. It felt like a garage door, but it was the right door. And people go, wow, how did you get into this beautiful house? And I'm like, sometimes it was the back door, sometimes it was the garage door, sometimes it was the doggy door. Like, it was a door, but I did it. You know what I mean? And so I think that's really important for people to not be ashamed if the door isn't opening and they're not jumping through another door. And that's the awkward. And I think that's what we're talking about, is that awkward tension of space for shame, but also space for grace. Just to say, I don't have to define this season. I don't actually, and I think that's important. I'm sure you felt this way, but I don't have to define my season for my mother, for my sister, for my best friend, for my pastor. If God has not defined the season, he doesn't need me to either. And so my season of it not being defined has been very painful at times because people don't know how to handle me. But when I know I'm on a divine assignment to be in an undefined season, it's been profound. It's given me grace to understand it, and it takes courage to do it. What about you? Have you had that?
Yeah, well, I'll mention this season earlier, but like one of my most difficult seasons in ministry, I've even been told in the like now that it's past, someone once said like, "Oh, you should have left that a long time ago. That was foolish." Blah blah blah. I kept my mouth shut, but I know in my heart, because like you mentioned it earlier, when you know that you're on assignment from God, and I knew within myself that I was not supposed to like circumvent, go around, or just cut off this season. That I had heard from God, and that we had heard from God, Katrina and I, and we were going to stay until God said otherwise. And then eventually he did. And now I can say wholeheartedly that I'm so grateful for that season, and that I did not like cut off the goodness of God in that season, even though it did not look or feel like his goodness. And I
Yes.
think something that you said earlier when we were talking about infertility and waiting on marriage, and you've said it several times, two different words. You've said curiosity and you've said sit. And I think that's something that we need to give permission to people to do. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't frenetically rush from thing to thing. Take a moment, start to ask questions of God, ask questions of yourself, and just sit and be still. And you mentioned having more compassion and grace and ministering to people, asking questions in a different way, and not being a fixer. I feel very much the same way after having gone through hard things and trying to get my little Legos to fit together and build something that I'm much more able. I'm a better, not just a better minister, but just a better person in general, to be able to sit with them, not try to fix it, ask questions of them, and just sit and realize I don't have to fix it. They might be in pain right now, but just the act of being there with them and showing them God's presence of being there with them is enough. It's
I totally
enough.
agree. And even to look at them, like you, Mark, you were talking, but to look at them and go, I know, I didn't know where to put that piece either. Just to kind of be honest about, yeah, that piece was hard for me too. Honestly, I still haven't found that piece yet. I'm waiting for that piece. I think the normalizing, humanizing, the humility to not say, well, this is the next page, just flip the page, it's right there. But to say, yeah, I get it. And I'm not gonna force you to fix this. I think us as leaders, we love to fix people's problems, and we go, well, that piece will fit here and just do this, this, and this. And sometimes it works, but in general, if you do it for them, it doesn't mean that they'll know what to do next. So sometimes you have to allow people to sit in the, I don't know how this fits, because in the long run, they have to learn how to use those elements in their life. You can make it look pretty, but they have to use it. I'm curious, Mark, I know that you're a worship pastor. I know you've worked with a lot of creatives. And one of the ways that we met was you did Havilah's author school. And honestly, our team just fell in love with you. Dad of four boys, pastoring in another city. In fact, we love you so much. You ended up coming on our staff and becoming an author coach, part of our we do it a couple times a year, our author school. But I'm curious, when you started to write your book, you wrote a book for creatives. So can you talk about that for a minute?
Well, speaking of being vulnerable, let's just be real. I started a different book and I
That's
didn't
right.
finish I didn't finish that book yet, because that book was about infertility, foster care, and adoption, and now it seems that that journey's not over. So I'm going to get back around to that one. But yeah, the one that's out now is called The Whole Creative. And really, there are a lot of creatives in the church or otherwise, and specifically this one is toward a Christian bent, but when you see the title and stuff, it can kind of swoop anybody in there and include them. But there are a lot of creatives who, while they may be using their gifts and their talents in ways that glorify God and even help out the church, sometimes those gifts and talents are platformed in such a way that the heart and the wholeness underneath that are not getting addressed. So I wrote a devotional just from my own personal experiences and backgrounds. And again, I am not perfect in this, but really to try to address how, if you're going to be a creative, you want to not just use your gift, talent, whatever it is, whether it's music or art or writing or singing, or there's so much dance and screenwriting, and like there's so many creative ways to express out there. But like, you need to make sure that you're good spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. There's so many more aspects, and if we're not careful, sometimes in the church, especially in the realm that I work in, it can be like, you're a great musician, let's get you up there.
Yep.
You're a great singer, let's get you up there. And then you find over months and years that some of these people off ramp because the things that really needed to be addressed
Yeah.
didn't get addressed, because those gifts and callings were platformed, but they didn't yet have the wholeness to be able to walk in that place. And I know this is a thing that's been addressed by a lot of different people, but for me, from a creative standpoint, I haven't seen a lot of that. So that's why I felt God chose to have me go in that direction.
I love that. It's called The Whole Creative. And I love that. I think what we're seeing in the church, specifically, I think charismatic churches, is we have a problem a systemic problem, which is that when we see somebody have a gift, we just platform them, we put a light on them. And you're right, it does minister to a lot of people. The Bible says the gifts of God are without repentance, meaning that he gives it to them. They grew up with it, they had it. It could be favor, it could be a talent. But the problem is that we are not giving time to develop character. And character is what happens under the surface, and charisma is kind of what happens on the outside. And what we don't understand is that, and this is your pastoral heart, Mark, which is so evident, is if we do not pastor people, then we will just simply use them. And then we're vulnerable to elevating them to a place where they are not loved and known for who they are. They're loved and known for what they bring. And we say it's all about the heart and it's all about the inside. And yet we as leaders are quick to elevate the outside. It really is, I think, a vulnerability that we as leaders need to start preaching a different message. And that message is your character matters. And so as a creative, we want you to go through a book called The Whole Creative because your character matters. We want you to stay married. We want you to love God. We don't want you to think that God has to abuse you to use you. And so we can say all those things, but it's not until we start prioritizing wholeness in their life by saying, hey, we're going to do a book study as a creative department, and we're going to talk about being whole. We're going to talk about the character. And I think that requires leadership. A lot of times leaders don't want to do that because creatives can be temperamental, they can be moody, and we're afraid that if we hurt the drummer's, heart, he's not going to drum for us next weekend. And God knows, I was a worship pastor for 8 years. I needed a drummer and a sound tech so bad, I married him, just so I could have a drummer and a sound tech. So I get it. Like, that is a real thing. I get it. I was like, job security right here. But I think that there is, we can be just a part. We can almost demonize someone falling or having a moral issue or a lifestyle issue or a marital relational. And we can go, gosh, I wish they had it together. But we were the ones that put the weight on their life without the structure and the foundation. And I think we need to start taking responsibility for some of those things and being more curious about their foundation and not just curious about their charisma or their gifting. Anyway, now you got me preaching, but
No, that's so good. And I just want to say, I don't know where we are with time, but like I have to look at my role as pastor first and worship leader second. I
wow.
have to look like if we're going to create environments that are like that, then that means I need to be true to my word and look at someone on my team. And even though I know, okay, for these 4 services, it might be kind of hard to schedule around, but I have relationship with you and I know something's not right. Not that you're in moral failure, but like you're tired, you're exhausted, you're going
Yeah.
through a hard season. And even though it's going to make my life quote unquote harder, you need to take like this Sunday off, maybe next Sunday, maybe you need a month of Sundays. And
Yep.
that's where we have to start to value people over the performance. And as a whole, we haven't, and I say we haven't always been great at doing that. And I get that when you're
Me
especially
too.
in smaller spaces, smaller churches, and I'm with you with the drummer thing. I'm like, where can I scare up
I
a drum
know.
around here?
We're gonna have
Like
another acoustic set. Let's do another acoustic set. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. But if we're going to create the goal is to create disciples, not great worship services. And so if our great commission is to go and make disciples, then I need to care more about their heart and their relationship with God and their wholeness as a whole person than I do about, okay, you got to sing and lead this song this week. And I hope you've listened to your part and you've learned that just correctly. And that starts with me. That starts with us. If I look and say, like you said, oh, I wish they'd gotten it together. They fell apart. I need to turn and look at me that
Mhm.
as a leader, if everything flows from the head down, I need to look at myself and as a leader and go, what can I do differently to empower in the future so that this doesn't happen again?
Oh, I love it, Mark. And I've seen you live that out for now a couple years. I've really watched your message stay the same for helping people, your pastoral heart shows. And I'm so glad you guys can pick up his book, The Whole Creative, on Amazon. And it's beautiful. I have it on my nightstand, actually. I've been reading it and I love it. I think it's brilliant. Mark, I want to make sure we mention this. You and I met each other, you've been and my author school. And for those that are interested in writing a book, Havilah's FREEBIES.com is available. We have applications that are open right now. You can actually submit your application. That's completely free. You can do it right now. The school is not. The school has a tuition, it has a time commitment. But what I want you guys to understand is that you probably have a book in you that you've been wanting to write and you haven't written it yet. And you keep thinking, I need the time and I need the money and I need the, environment. And for Mark and I, we had 4 littles in our homes and we wrote a book, and we know it's possible while working full-time jobs. It's possible. And that's how we've created our author school. So Mark, for those that are listening and curious about the school, what's the one thing that you took away in your experience at the Havilah's author school?
Well, I've been a writer for a while, but being a writer, being someone that can like write a good email or write a good essay or write a good this or that, that is completely different from writing a book. And so I just want to say, if you're one of those people out there that thinks like, I've got a book in me, or I feel like I'm supposed to write a book, but you're on the fence, now's the time to get off the fence, because I truly believe you can do it. I think this woman is brilliant. I think Havilah has found a way to create a replicable process so that if you write one book and then you have a message for another, you can turn right around and do the exact same thing. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that even if you think you're really smart, or even if you think you're not so smart, that in Havilah's author school, your hand will be held and you will be walked through the process. Not going to do the work for you. Let's make that really clear. You're going to have to be the one sitting in front of your computer and typing out the words. But if you want to learn how to do it and you've got a message, I can guarantee you in those 16 weeks at the end of it, you will hold a first draft in your hand.
It's amazing. And we've seen at our last school, we almost had 50% of all of our students complete their manuscript, which is wild within that time frame. And most of them will finish by the end of the year. And so I'm so excited. Mark, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for really having this conversation about how our life fits together, what happens when the piece doesn't quite fit, we can't find the piece. And man, this is such a good conversation to have. And honestly, I love and respect you so much. For those of you that are here right now, we're really excited that you're here. If you're still curious about our author school, applications are open right now. You can go to havilahsauthor.com. And for the rest of you, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. We will have a brand new series coming out on a monthly basis. And for those of you that would like to know maybe more, this whole month has been about purpose. And you can start from the top of the month and go down through the series of purpose. We're having a good conversation called "What Am I Doing with My Life?" That is a series topic. So if you're curious about that, what am I doing with my life? Jump in and follow the series. You guys, thanks for being here. And until next time, have a great day.